Bills Mafia. On today's Air Raid Hour pregame, we'll be breaking down what we expect to see from the Bills today, plus previewing key matchups and handing out our pregame superlatives. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Cover One Air Raid Hour Buffalo Bills pregame show. Today, the Buffalo Bills take on the not Oakland Raiders. I almost, in my mind, it was Oakland. And then I was going to correct myself and just say Vegas, but I thought I'd let the viewers know that in my mind it was Oakland. But the Las Vegas Raiders today at Highmark Stadium. And I don't know about you, Dave, but some serious FOMO going on for me because I see all the people out there celebrating all the good vibes and having fun at their pregame tailgate, the home opener, one of my favorite days of the year. I was a season ticket holder for 10 plus years. It was my favorite day of the year. I don't know. I'm feeling some serious FOMO today. How about yourself?
Yeah, there's a lot of FOMO. You see all the pictures on social media of people that, typically aren't together. And then these games obviously bring people together. And that's like one of the best things about going to the games together, especially on the home opener. And ultimately, like, we need those good vibes for today, right? Want to carry those good vibes that are happening out in the tailgates and the like into the stadium and into kickoff, because the Bills really need that right now. And I think the Bills really need to feed off that home energy this week, really kind of get back on track. And so hopefully all this positive momentum sort of pregame, putting the Jets game in the rear view, getting focused on this home opener, not wanting to let the fans down, but having the fans themselves kind of also help carry that positive energy into kickoff and beyond. Yeah, man, it's feeling good right now. So hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah, I mean, Greg and Aaron look like they had a lot of fun yesterday at that pregame tailgate party that was thrown together by Left Turn. They look like they had a good time with a bunch of special guests there doing some live pods. Now, you have an interesting story. You grew up a Bills fan, but you weren't from Western New York. You were from New York, but not Western New York. Have you ever had a chance to attend a Buffalo Bills home opener?
Not a home opener. Nope. I have not attended a home opener.
Dude, that's got to be bucket list for you, man. That's got to be on the bucket list.
It is. And I almost did 2 years ago. We were up there obviously for the Green Bay preseason game. And I had thought, well, maybe I'll stay an extra week and be there for the home opener. Didn't work out that way, but it is certainly a bucket list item for me. And I'm going to try to make it happen here in the next couple of years.
And I'll tell you what, I like I said, I had season tickets for 10 plus years, and I've moved out of town since then. I obviously live in Arizona now. I've never had Bills season tickets when the Bills were good. So there was really no pressure at that tailgate. There was no anxiety at that tailgate because it was like, well, they go in and they stink. I'll just get extra drunk. Like, it's not going to bother me that much. There was never an expectation on the football team. So I feel like it's almost a blessing that I moved, because I don't know if I would be a fun time at a Buffalo Bills tailgate anymore, just because with the high expectations comes high anxiety for me. And Kevin at the Pacific comes in the comment section and says, who's going to take us higher? And hey, it was meant to be that we are out of town Bills fans, because now we get to have this conversation with you guys every week in the Buffalo Bills pregame tailgate here on YouTube. So let's get it started. Dave, I know you wanted to give out your final thoughts on Bills Jets before we moved into Bills Raiders. We obviously didn't have the typical post-game show that we normally have. So get it off your chest. And any final takeaways that you want to give to Bills Jets?
Yeah, obviously, time heals all wounds, as we know, and so the further we remove we get from the Monday night, the less worse I felt. Still didn't feel great, because that's a game that you let slip through your fingers. I think the most painful thing to me was the fact that, like, everything was lined up for the Bills to just kind of honestly walk through and just do what they needed to do and just get out of there with a win. Second Aaron Rodgers goes down, you figure this is just going to be formality for the Bills, and it turned out anything but. So credit to the Jets for what they did, but also, like, the Bills gave that one away, right? And obviously Josh Allen, a huge factor for that. And that's going to be one of the main things that we talk about today, right? Is like, can
Yeah.
you bounce back, eliminate the turnovers? Another team where the Bills really should go into this game as heavy favorites, and they are as a home opener. And so I guess my final thoughts there were like, look, it kind of reminded me a bit of the Steelers opener a couple years ago, where we kind of went into that game pretty confident. That Steelers defense stymied the Bills in week
Mhm.
one, came out of that game with a loss. That was a home game, so maybe even a little worse. So that's kind of how I'm feeling, and like drawing the parallel to this Jets opener. But yeah, still got to right the ship this week.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, like I just been angry all week. Not to mention, like, on top of that, my college teams, the University of Buffalo and Arizona State, are not doing so hot right now. So the Buffalo Bills need to rebound this week, or I am just gonna absolutely lose it. But looking back at the Bills Jets game, could other people have done things better? Special teams, coaching, etc. Of course, everyone could have done better than they did in that football game. But at the end of the day, Josh Allen lost us that football game, and that is extremely, extremely frustrating because it was a division game. It's in a
Mhm.
season where we talked about that on our preview show. Every win matters because the Buffalo Bills have an extremely tough schedule. So when you're handed a win with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt, you cannot let that slip out of your fingers. And what frustrates me the most is that Josh Allen did it because he put himself above the team. He really did. I mean, what he did last week was a slap in the face to his head coach, who told him multiple times on the sidelines to be smarter. His offensive coordinator, who drew up plenty of underneath routes for him to throw the ball to, and the other players in that locker room, because he cost us a game in a season that is so important where every win matters. So I think in a sense, and I might be over the top with this, but I really do feel like Josh Allen needs to earn the trust back of some of his teammates this week. And I think he set the tone this week. If you follow the Cover One Slack channel, you're a Cover One insider. Eric shared the story this week that Josh Allen was in the locker room on the Buffalo Bills' typical day off, and that he convinced a lot of his teammates to come in on the Buffalo Bills' typical day off. So the Buffalo Bills got an extra day of working because they were working on their day off. So Josh Allen looks like he takes it serious, but I'm getting really frustrated. We had this conversation again in the preseason show when we set our season predictions. I'm sick and tired of this team learning from losses. Learn in the middle of the game. Learn after your first interception. It shouldn't take you an L to Zach Wilson to learn not to be done with the football. It
Yeah.
really, really should not, and that's the most frustrating part.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he comes out today and really does, quote, take what the defense is giving him, take some of those things that are likely to be available underneath, and really just kind of get into a rhythm, right? Because at the end of the day, like, shots will be taken, and I get that. Like, there's no reason to just like all of a sudden nerf Josh Allen, but
Mhm,
um when he is at his best, it's when he's really, it's a death by a thousand paper cuts and a few big shots, right? I mean, that's kind
mhm,
of when he's been at his best, where he's been just so efficient and so precise with the football, moving it down the field, that it just frustrates the defense and eventually kind of takes his
mhm,
shots. And I think that's what I'm going to be looking for today, to see if he kind of, if that changes and that translates to the field, right? It's one thing to come in on the day off and kind of spend that extra time.
mhm.
It's another thing for that to then translate to the field, right? So that's fine. And
Yeah.
yes, Sophia, we are about to
Yeah,
move
that's
on
what
from
we're
this.
doing right now.
We
Perfect
just we just didn't
perfect
get a
segue.
chance to talk about the game afterwards on Monday, so we will move on now officially to this Raiders game.
Yeah, big segue here. Hopefully the weather report is not an omen of things to come, because 60s and cloudy for pretty much the duration of the game. At least that's what's projected. So hopefully the clouds aren't a bad omen. Still pretty good weather for a home opener, a nice crisp fall-esque day there in Buffalo. The highs do get into the 70s and the sun does come out, but that's not until 4 p.m. ish when the game is coming to its conclusion. So a pretty solid weather report there in Orchard Park. I'm sure everybody's really enjoying that tailgate. The inactive list for the Buffalo Bills, it is the exact same as last week. We already had this conversation last week, so we don't really have to get too much into it. Damar Hamlin, Kyer Elam, Jermaine Ifedi, probably still not ready, still not up enough on the playbook to get activated. Alec Anderson and Kingsley Jonathan. For the Raiders, Aiden O'Connell, Jacoby Myers, Chris Smith, Chandler Jones, Amari Burney, Nesta Jade Silvera. Two names stick out the most on this Raiders inactive list. Let's start with Jacoby Myers because the Raiders have some fun skill position players on offense. Obviously, they have two alpha players in Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs. Jacoby Myers did an excellent job last week taking the pressure off of those two. And I think that he really opened things up for Davante Adams. That's not going to be there for the Raiders this week. Other guys like Austin Hooper, Hunter Renfrow are going to have to step up. What are your thoughts on the Jacoby Myers injury?
I mean, look, we thought Aaron Rodgers being out after the 4 snaps last week was going to be a huge difference in the game, and it turned out to not be. Like to think that Jacoby Myers being out in this game is a huge advantage to the Bills. Like you mentioned, super efficient. Looks like the Raiders made the right move there and kind of bringing Jacoby Myers in, and New England maybe making the wrong move and letting him go and replacing him with Juju Smith-Schuster. And Jacoby Myers, obviously, very, very familiar with his play. NC State guy, watched him play in college for a number of years. The things that plagued him in college, some drops and things like that, seem to have been worked out now in his first couple years in the NFL. And he's really carved out a nice name for himself. And that combination of him and Adams is a formidable duo to go along with Jacobs. So now what this leaves the Raiders is with a lot of top heavy star power now on the offense. And that's not to say that they can't get it done, but one less thing for the Bills to worry about now. Hunter Renfrow at times in his career has had some really nice games and has been a key cog in that Raiders offense, but that's kind of dipped of late. So we'll see if he kind of comes back into the fold this week and fills some of that void. But obviously a big advantage for the Bills to not have to face Jacoby Myers on the other side. And I mean, they are familiar with him spending that time in New England as he did, but still, the Raiders now are going to have to really rely on those top two studs in Adams and Jacobs.
I'm a little surprised that Aidan O'Connell is inactive. He had a great preseason, probably the best preseason of any quarterback in the National Football League. I mean, he was a national media darling, and a lot of, draft Twitter and a lot of, people were talking about how great of a preseason Aidan O'Connell had for the Raiders. And last week in that Raiders game, like there was a play where Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt and had to come out. And I was like, oh yes, it's Aidan O'Connell time. We get to watch some Aidan O'Connell. And then Brian Hoyer trots out in the field. I'm like, no, they are in trouble. So the fact that like that Jimmy Garoppolo, that even though he missed one play, the thought of Brian Hoyer having to play the rest of the game didn't scare Josh McDaniels enough into making Aidan O'Connell the number 2, which is absolutely shocking to me. But that's beside the point because Jimmy Garoppolo likely will stay healthy and make his way through the game. But if he does get hurt, it's Brian Hoyer time for the Las Vegas Raiders. And obviously the other big one is Chandler Jones. I don't want to get too much into why Chandler Jones is not playing because we do not know the details surrounding this very, very wild story between Chandler Jones and his disconnect with the Las Vegas Raiders organization and all that's going on. But at the end of the day, he's not playing today. Outside of Max Crosby, who we will talk about at length in a couple of minutes here, the Raiders pass rush was practically non-existent against the Denver Broncos. That's a big, big loss for a team that relies on a 4-man rush.
Big loss for a team that relies on a 4-man rush. And obviously we talk about the sort of top heavy nature of the Raiders offense now with Adams and Jacobs. This becomes a very top heavy reliance now on Max Crosby if you're the Raiders defense. And so while the Raiders might not necessarily be super deep at the defensive end position now, especially without Chandler Jones, they have that alpha Max Crosby there who is going to be a matchup problem for Spencer Brown. So we'll see if the Bills help in that regard, maybe put Dawson Knox in line next to Spencer Brown. But Max Crosby, even on his own, even after a slow pass rush week last week for the team, although he did have a sack, is still formidable enough to warrant the Bills being a little bit extra cautious there, even without Chandler Jones on the other side. So again, Jacoby Myers out on the offense, Chandler Jones out on the defense, 2 big advantages for the Bills, 1 less guy to worry about on either side of the ball. And so regardless of what you may feel about what's going on with that situation, and like you said, we don't really know, it is an advantage Bills without Chandler Jones.
All right. In a minute, we're going to get to the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Las Vegas Raiders defense and what key matchups we're looking at and what we expect the Buffalo Bills to do to attempt to score points on these Las Vegas Raiders. But before we do that, a quick word from our guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast on the best ways to support us here at Cover One.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right, that is the best way to support us here at Cover One. Become a Cover One Pass subscriber. So, Dave, let's get into it. The Buffalo Bills offense versus the Raiders defense. This stat stuck out to me the most when I was doing my weekly perusing through SAS. The Raiders utilized a too high shell 62% of their defensive plays in week one. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I expect that to increase in week two. I think that they're going to force Josh Allen to be patient and take stuff underneath, as well as I think test the Buffalo Bills' ability to run the football. And when I think about that statistic and I think about what the Raiders are probably going to attempt to do to the Buffalo Bills, my first thought comes to Josh Allen and the mistakes that he made last week. Elite quarterbacks blend their awe-inspiring talent down the field with their ability to dink and dunk, or as the Patriots labeled it under Tom Brady, kill you with a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Mahomes lost Tyreek Hill last year and proceeded to win a Super Bowl, not throwing a single touchdown pass over 19 yards all season. Josh Allen needs to improve his discipline and his patience if this team wants to accomplish its ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl. What are your thoughts on what Josh Allen needs to do today?
Well, yeah, and it starts with obviously the decision making, right? So regardless of what defense the Raiders trot out there, I do expect them to be in too high shell a ton, 60, 70% of the time. They're going to say, hey, Josh Allen, last week you threw 3-4 inadvised balls against a Jets defense that's very good, by the way, but you showed that you were impatient. So we're going to force you to go and maybe make 12, 15 play drives down the field to score on us. And if Josh Allen is patient and his decision making is where it needs to be, there's no reason that he cannot do that against this Raiders defense. Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox could be big benefactors of that, with the fact that if they are playing too high shell, the middle and underneath areas of the field should be open, and the run game as well with James Cook should be facing some lighter boxes as well. But at the end of the day, it starts and ends with Josh Allen's decision making, and he cannot like a 10, 12 play drive that results in a touchdown and takes 6-7 minutes is going to feel a lot better than you trying to throw 2-3 deep shots and coming off the field really quickly, or throwing another, interception or whatever it may be. So I'd like to think that, given what happened a week ago, that will be on display today. But ultimately, I believe if Josh Allen has a good decision-making day and is patient, then there should be no reason why he can't march the Bills down the field all day long.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it too, just the Raiders defense is not even in the same stratosphere as the Jets defense. Like, let's be real here. Like, we should expect a course correction this week, not just because the Buffalo Bills are inspired to play better offense than they did against the Jets, but because the Raiders are that much worse of a defense than the New York Jets. I mean, when you talk about like alpha players, they got one on this defense, and that's Max Crosby. They have some fun, interesting pieces. I like Divine Diablo. Trayvon Moehrig, I think, could be a good safety in this league. They obviously have Marcus Peters on the outside. On one side, Ja'Cory Bennett, their young corner, showed some flashes last week. They got some nice rotational defensive tackles, but obviously no stud there. They got their first round top 10 draft pick in Tyree Wilson, who really underwhelmed last week. He's a project. I think I don't want to use the B word, but I was not high on him coming out of the draft process. So it'll be interesting. The Buffalo Bills should course correct this week. This is a team that goes heavy nickel, right? And this is a team that's going to drop 2 deep shell. More James Cook. Like, I want to see even more James Cook than we saw last week. And we saw a decent amount of James Cook last week. And even though I don't blame Ken Dorsey for what happened last week, I do think the Buffalo Bills game plan still needs to be death by 1,000 paper cuts that they're going to too deep show. You can't force passes, but you need to use the short to intermediate passing game to create calculated shots down the football field. Give Josh something to sort of calm his nerves, to keep him humming, to keep him moving the chains, draw some things up down the football field to sort of scratch that itch for him. And one of the things that I wanted to see more from Ken Dorsey this week, we did not see a lot of pre-snap motion last week against the New York Jets.
And we talked about that too.
I was shocked because that's the easiest way to figure out what coverage a team is in. And the Buffalo Bills were not utilizing that against the New York Jets. So I would love to see some more window dressing this week because the Buffalo Bills certainly have the players to do it.
I'd like to see that too. I mean, statistically, the Bills should have done that last week. The Jets obviously, not plummets, but they're much worse when teams use pre-snap motion. Same for the Raiders, right? And I will be interested to see. I mean, we talk about the running game with James Cook. We talk about, pre-snap motion. The Bills run a ton out of shotgun, right? So it'll be interesting to see if they put Josh Allen under center a bit more this week, going up against a less talented Raiders defense. Maybe letting James Cook get a bit more of a head of steam, right, on some of these run plays and letting him really put that 1 foot in the ground and go, as opposed to trying to get that head of steam from the shotgun handoffs. Like, that's something I'm going to be really interested in paying attention to. If the Bills kind of mix up their run game from what it was a week ago, those traps and those draws worked pretty well against that Jets defense in certain situations. But I wonder if a more traditional approach against this Raiders defense would be more in the cards or a bit more appropriate in a matchup like this. So not just the pre-snap motion, but the formations, right? With it, as far as Josh being either under center or in the shotgun. Now we're still going to see him out of the shotgun a ton. We just always do. But it would be interesting to see some of Josh's best throws, honestly, and some of the Bills' best plays have been where he's been in under center and he's either rolled out or had play action off of those sort of traditional sort of under center formation. So run game important. I'm with you. More James Cook. He was pretty good against a tough defense last week. Even with Quinton Williams blowing up the middle a few different times. The Raiders don't have personnel to do that, right? Jerry Tillery's a nice piece. I get that. But this is not the same animal like you mentioned. So pre-snap motion, I'm with you. And I want to see kind of how they approach the running game from a formation perspective.
You mentioned this a couple of minutes ago too, but I think the Buffalo Bills really need to lean into their underneath weapons. Obviously, James Cook is a part of that in the passing game as well as the run game. I want to see Dalton Kincaid and I want to see Dawson Knox get fed this week. I really want to see them incorporated into the passing game. And I'd like to see more Deontay Hardy. I like some of the stuff he did early in the game underneath as an extension of the running game. And that sort of went away in the second half. And I don't really understand why it went away in the second half. So use Deontay Hardy, use that game-breaking speed to your advantage. We saw last week, I'm not comparing Deontay Hardy to Tyreek Hill, but we saw some of the creative ways that Mike McDaniel was getting the ball into the hands of Tyreek Hill and helping create separation for him and helping create less of a logjam at the line of scrimmage for him. And I'm not comparing him to Tyreek Hill, but other teams were copying that. Like Sean McVay did a really good job of creating space for Tutu Atwell, right? So get into the lab, Ken Dorsey, figure out ways to get the ball into Deontay Hardy's hands, because outside of Stephon Diggs and maybe James Cook, Deontay Hardy's the biggest game breaker on this offense. He is the most explosive player on this offense. So if you can find creative ways to get the ball in his hands and give him some space, I'm really, really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, especially because, the linebackers, I mean, they graded out Diablo, he graded out well last week. But if you look at over the course of the last couple seasons, those linebackers for the Raiders have really not been good in coverage.
Spillane is ripe for the picking.
Yeah, Spillane's ripe for the picking. And not to mention Merrig, right? He's more of, I don't really see him so much as like that center fielding type, like elite center fielding type. You would think that separation in the middle of the field to kind of pair with the matchup problems that you can have with Kincaid and Knox's size, Kincaid, Knox, and Hardy could be three huge factors in this game, all three of them over the middle,
Mhm.
sort of underneath areas of the field. And then obviously you'd like to put those guys in a position where they're catching it on the move upfield, right? That's the thing to me. Like, I want to see some schematic ways for
Yeah.
Ken Dorsey to have these guys catching the ball on the move and not catching the ball coming back towards the line of scrimmage.
Mhm.
I want to see these guys running away from the line of scrimmage as they're catching the ball
Yeah.
to give them a chance to get some yards after catch. That's going to be a big that could be a big benefit to a guy like Deontay Hardy.
Yeah, Randy Harvey coming to the great comment. He says the Jets were playing top down, swarming to the ball. Hardy didn't have the space to operate. I expect that to be different this week. I agree with that. I think the Buffalo Bills will have more opportunities to create yak this week. I think the Buffalo Bills will have more opportunities to get the ball into the hands of some of their playmakers this week. The more traditional passing game, too, Ja'Cory Bennett is a rookie, mid-round pick. He looked promising last week, but at the end of the day, he is a rookie playing in his second career game. You have two veteran wide receivers in Stephon Diggs, who is your alpha, who needs to be fed. That goes without saying. I don't think we need to say that every week anymore, right? He needs to be fed. And then you have Gabriel Davis, who's now entering his fourth year. He kind of had a slow week last week, so he's looking to ramp up. It's going to be interesting to see how the Raiders deploy their cornerbacks. Does Marcus Peters shadow Stephon Diggs? Do they play a side? Do they pick a side and play a side? If so, the Buffalo Bills should test Ja'Cory Bennett, and they should test him against some of these more veteran savvy wide receivers that they have in Gabriel Davis and Stephon Diggs, because Bennett's got the speed to keep up with them. He's a speedster, but at the end of the day, the Buffalo Bills have these veteran savvy receivers who know things and can do things that Bennett has never seen before. So the Buffalo Bills, I think, will have their chances down the field, and they should look at Bennett as the guy to target.
Yeah, I agree. And like the one play that the Bills hit big with Gabe Davis last week is the kind of type of play I'm having in mind to beat a guy like Bennett, right? Using that body position, using that size of Gabe Davis to kind of body in front of him on these post routes and things like that may be the way to go. And also introduces another element where you can attack potentially over the middle of the field. I don't expect Gabe Davis to necessarily have a hugely efficient game today. I think that I don't necessarily think it's a great matchup for him personally, but I do think he can do damage on limited opportunities like he has in the past in many other situations. So, wouldn't surprise me if we see like a 2-3 catch game from Gabe Davis, but if he's close to like 80-90 yards on those 2-3 catches, that would not surprise me.
20 yards per
in the
catch,
least.
baby. Let's do
Yeah,
it. Keep it up.
but I'm not. I personally don't look at this as a great matchup for Davis. I think it's a great matchup for Diggs. I think it's a great matchup for the tight ends. Hopefully, if Davis does get a few opportunities, that he makes the most of them. But I'm not necessarily expecting, just because he had a slow game last week, that he's going to all of a sudden blow up this week. I would caution people on that front with Gabe Davis.
Jessica Tense coming in with a great comment. She said, like to see Kincaid and Knox just bully the Raiders secondary. Yeah, I think a lot of Bills fans want to see that right now. And then Charles G coming in saying, I really want to see how Dorsey opens up the game. Should be some easy rhythm throws to get Josh going, plus the run game. I agree with that as well. Watching how Ken Dorsey decides to scheme up this game. That's the one thing I don't want to see, is because of how bad they were last week, or how bad Josh was, I should say, last week. I don't want to see them come out too tight, and I don't want to see them come out too conservative, because again, we mentioned at the top of this segment, the Raiders defense is not the Jets defense. Don't let getting shell-shocked by the Jets affect the way you approach the Raiders, because they are different teams. They are different defenses. You should not come out conservative. You should not come out vanilla. You should not come out afraid of the Las Vegas Raiders because the New York Jets shook you. Like that should not happen, because they are very, very different defenses. For me too, and this is going to be my recurring theme. This is going to be my narrative throughout the whole season. So prepare yourself for this now.
Okay.
Dave, is I really think I want, by the end of the season, I want this Buffalo Bills offense to funnel through three players. I want it to funnel through Stephon Diggs, who I think should get fed at least 10 times a game. And I want this offense to funnel through Dalton Kincaid and James Cook. I want these to be the three alphas of our offense. And everyone else, Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy, those are the auxiliary players who will get their 4 to 5 touches a game, dependent on how the game flows, how the game goes. But I want the concerted effort for this Buffalo Bills football team and Ken Dorsey to get the ball into these three guys' hands on a weekly basis, because I think these are the three best players on our offense. And I think it adds a variety, right? You got Diggs on the boundary, you got Kincaid over the middle in the underneath in the slot, and then you got James Cook out of the backfield. So I think that those are the three players that the Buffalo Bills should funnel their offense through. Everyone else should be an auxiliary weapon, week to week matchup dependent. But these are the three guys who should be, at the end of the day, like fantasy studs for the Buffalo Bills, because they should be fed.
And if you think about the evolution of where this team was personnel wise a couple years ago, right? It was very wide receiver centric, right? It was Diggs, it was Beasley, it was John Brown, Gabriel
Sanders.
Davis, Sanders. It was a very wide receiver centric offense, which worked, right? It worked for them. But then you looked around at the league and you looked at teams like the Chiefs, who kind of had that trio of, whether it was Pacheco, Kelsey, and Hill, or I guess Pacheco wasn't there with Hill, but like at the time, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Hill, and Kelsey, right? And the auxiliary pieces were guys like Mecole Hardman, and like it was nice to have those wide receivers kind of as auxiliary pieces. And I like that the Bills are kind of maybe going towards having like a trio that's not so centric on wide receivers. It's more balanced, and you have the tight end, you have the alpha wide receiver, you have the really young and up and coming game breaking running back. And then when you kind of frame it that way, and guys like Dawson Knox and Gabriel Davis and Deontay Hardy become auxiliary pieces, you can really start to put a narrative together around like the balance and sort of evolution of what this offense could be. And it's not just because you don't want to have a wide receiver centric offense, but it's to create mismatches, right, against opposing defenses and make them, have to think about more than just wide receivers. And it's like just adding stress to the defense is the name of the game. And so I like where they're headed. And I think that your perspective there makes a ton of sense to me. And I would agree.
And Randy Hartman comes with a good comment too. Like, Josh Allen's got to adjust to this as well, because part of it is him adjusting to this process of not being so wide receiver centric and getting other weapons involved. So that's a great point from Randy there. The Buffalo or the Las Vegas Raiders, they relied on a 4-man rush 30 times in week 1, 6 most in the NFL. Only blitzed 7 times the entire game against the Denver Broncos. That is the game plan of a team with a really effective pass rush, right? One problem for the Las Vegas Raiders: the only effective pass rusher was Max Crosby. I mean, but he was stupid effective. 6 pressures, 4 hurries.
That might be all they need, though. That might be
sack
all they need.
on 41 pass rushing downs. How do the Buffalo Bills account for the absolute freak that is Max Crosby?
Spencer Brown got a good warm up, right, last week against the Jets. They're gonna have to use Knox in line, I think, a bit with
100%.
Spencer Brown. I mean, that's number one. That's still gonna allow you to send Kincaid out into routes. It's still gonna allow you to have hopefully have pretty good route concepts and personnel out there with Davis and Kincaid and Diggs, right, and even Hardy for that matter. But Knox is going to have to help Spencer Brown on that side. And ultimately, that's got to be the focal point if you're the Bills. Like, if you are going to lose to a 4-man rush, it can't be Max Crosby, right? Like, you have to make someone else beat you. And if the Bills do a decent job in helping Spencer Brown out on that right side and kind of limiting the damage that Max Crosby can cause, they'll have a really good chance to have one overall good pass protection in the game for Josh Allen. And hopefully, maybe Josh will get a little less skittish and kind of wanting to, remove himself from the pocket earlier than he needs to because the line and the protection's holding up. And secondly, maybe like give a boost of confidence to Spencer Brown, right? I think like if you can kind of, even if you have help, kind of take Max Crosby out of the game to the extent you can early on. Don't let the Raiders have any kind of easy, cheap momentum, emotional uplifts with Max Crosby on the defense, because he's really that emotional leader as well for them, on top of being their best player on the defense. That's key, right? And I think to me, it kind of really starts and ends with helping with Dawson Knox with Spencer Brown.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the number one thing you can do to help out Spencer Brown is to keep Dawson Knox in Brown's hip pocket the entire game to chip, even if he doesn't stay in the whole time, just to chip and to slow Max Crosby down a little bit. But at the end of the day, the Buffalo Bills can get creative with it. Whatever side of the field that Max Crosby is on, whether it's Deion Dawkins' side or Spencer Brown's side, that's where somebody should be, whether it's Dawson Knox, whether it's Dalton Kincaid, whether it's even Gabriel Davis and Trent Sherfield, right? Or Reggie Gilliam. Anything they can do, a receiver in line, a tight end, whatever. There should always be a sixth guy on whatever side Max Crosby is on. Honestly, the entire game. If Max Crosby's on the field and I see a 5-man protection, I'm going to lose my shit.
Well,
Like
maybe,
that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, maybe in some situations the Bills can use that to their advantage and maybe actually set up a few decent screens. Like they tried to set up a few last week that didn't really go for much. But if they, the times where there might be 5-man protection, maybe those are the times that they can get James Cook involved in the screen.
And another thing they can do too is like if you get Max Crosby out like 5-man protection, maybe he gets a little antsy, gets out in a wide 9 and gets very wide. You could maybe QB drop the middle too. Like that might be something that'd be interesting. Charles G coming with an interesting comment. Maybe the Buffalo Bills use a little bit of Ryan Bates as a tackle eligible or as a 6-man eligible. That's something that maybe we didn't see last week, but we saw from the Buffalo Bills in years past using guys like Tommy Doyle and Bobby Hart. So maybe we see an offensive lineman become an eligible receiver this week and play in line as well. All right, let's move on from the Buffalo Bills offense to the Buffalo Bills defense. The Buffalo Bills defense was solid last week against Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. They're really not at fault for what happened in that game. So they look to continue that momentum heading into week 2 at home, which I think is going to be fun. Home crowd behind them against the Las Vegas Raiders. I want to start the conversation with Jimmy G, new quarterback there in the Las Vegas. He was kept clean on 86% of his dropbacks in week 1. That's a high percentage of being kept clean. A lot of that has to do with the quick passing game and getting the ball out of his hands quickly and him being a smart, veteran, savvy quarterback. He was 17 of 22 when kept clean for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. When under pressure, he was 3 for 4 for 46 yards. So even under pressure, he had a pretty solid game. Like I said, savvy, veteran quarterback who will keep this offense moving. But at the end of the day, they only scored 17 points. This is very much a ball control offense who believes in long drives. You're not going to see a lot of shot plays. You're not going to see a lot of explosives from the Las Vegas Raiders. Their offensive line from left to right, Colton Miller, Dylan Parham, Andre James, Greg Van Roten, Jermaine Alamalur, our guy who we've wanted the Buffalo Bills to sign 2 years in a row now. On paper, not the greatest offensive line in the world, but they delivered last week against the Denver Broncos.
Yep.
To me, I look at Parham, who struggled last year, Andre James and Greg Van Roten, who they are willingly choosing to start. I look at that as the place for the Buffalo Bills to attack. Interior pressure is the most important. Ed Oliver needs to have a day. I think Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, get them blitzing the A gap, get them blitzing the B gap, get the pressure right there in Jimmy Garoppolo's face. And then something that they did struggle a little bit with last week against the Jets, got to get them off the field on third downs. You can't let this Raiders team extend drives and gain confidence. What are your thoughts on how the Buffalo Bills should attack the Raiders passing game before we get to Josh Jacobs in that running game?
Yeah, well, it was nice to see the Bills pass rush looked pretty alive for the most part last week against the Jets. Leonard Floyd, our wild card, had a nice game. Gregory Rousseau looked good. I mean, the Bills defensive line for the most part did what they needed to do. I know that there were a couple big runs that popped off, and obviously can't have that happen this week. But as far as the pass rush is concerned, I like what I saw. I mean, the key for me is Jimmy G's got that quick passing game going, right? You need to find a way to get pressure quickly on the Raiders. I feel like you can't, while you're going to have a pretty good 4-man pass rush against that line, I think to put just an added bit of stress on them, because you mentioned attacking the middle, those A-gap blitzes to me become really important. Sending Milano, sending Bernard, on top of the fact that you're already probably going to be stressing the Raiders with an advantage, really, right? If you're the Bills defensive line, you do have an advantage from a pass rush standpoint over this Raiders offensive line. So I know Jimmy G was good under pressure last week, but at the end of the day, you don't want the reverse to happen of what you want to happen on offense. You don't want the Raiders to be keeping you on the field on third downs. You don't want Jimmy G to be taking these 12, 15 play drives down the field, because honestly, that's what the Raiders would want. Like you look at that Raiders Broncos game from last week, the Raiders only had 7 drives the entire game. The Broncos only had 6. Like there were very few possessions for each team in that game,
yeah.
if you look at it. And the Raiders were 5 for 11 on third down, which is it's not terrible. And they converted their only 4th down. So, between 3rd and 4th downs, they were 6 for 12, 50%, which is pretty solid from NFL standards. So can't let that happen. You got to get off the field on 3rd down. A-gap blitzes, I would like to see that make Jimmy G make quick decisions, especially without a guy like Jacoby Myers on the other side. Force him into very quick decisions to reads that maybe won't be his first read, and put him in a situation where maybe he can turn the ball over. So, yeah, I think the blitzing up the middle is probably where I would go as well.
Yeah, I mean, last week you mentioned the Raiders and the Broncos 7 drives and 6 drives. Last week I coined the Titans Saints game the mid off game of the week, where there's the 2 most mid teams in the league playing against each other. But I think Broncos Raiders might have been close second. Like just 2 completely mediocre teams, just like looking somewhat competent because they're playing each other, but also embarrassing at the same time. Like that was another mid off game of the week. So the Buffalo Bills, like I said, like they need to go about and do their business. But one of the toughest challenges they're going to face is Davante Adams, who's one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. Last year, we saw teams get creative trying to shut down Stephon Diggs, right? They would bracket Stephon Diggs with the cornerback 2 and the safety, and they would put cornerback 1 on their wide receiver 2. Last week, Trey White shadowed Wilson, Garrett Wilson. Do the Buffalo Bills maybe try to bracket Davante Adams with CB2 and a safety and let Trey White go mano-a-mano against the Raiders wide receiver number 2? But honestly, who's the Raiders wide receiver 2 going to be on the boundary? Is it going to be Wilkinson? Are they going to move Hunter Renfrow out to the boundary? So that was on my show notes, is like maybe something the Bills should consider to shut down Davante Adams, but they might not have to worry about that because there really is no secondary boundary threat for this Raiders team. But at the end of the day, whatever it is that Sean McDermott needs to do, Davante Adams needs to be his focal point, and he needs to force Austin Hooper, Myers, the rookie tight end, Trey Tucker, the rookie receiver, and Hunter Renfrow. Those are the guys that you want to beat you, not Davante Adams, right? Like you need to force those guys to step up.
I am bracketing Adams, right? I'll put Trey White and a safety, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be pretty comfortable. And if he beats that, like he's going to get his at some point. I mean, Jimmy G is a very accurate passer, as we mentioned, and Adams is, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL, probably top 5 at worst. 3 straight years all pro. I mean, the dude is an absolute gazelle. He's got size. I mean, he's one of the best. And so you do whatever you can to take him out of the game. And if you get beat by the likes of Austin Hooper, if you get beat by the likes of Hunter Renfrow in the slot, and like he gets the better of Taron Johnson and Jordan Poyer in the slot, and if Trey Tucker somehow gets the best of like Christian Benford, you just have to kind of live with that, right? I mean, to me, like I'll take my chances with Christian Benford on Trey Tucker, whoever else they put on the boundary. I'll take my chances with maybe Taron Johnson getting manned up, or Matt Milano getting manned up, with a guy like Hunter Renfrow or Austin Hooper, no problem, right? Like I just like Adams can't be the guy that beats you. And if he is the guy that beats you, again, make him do it over and over again.
Yep.
Don't let him get behind your defense. Don't let him make a splash play. And ultimately a couple splash plays is really what kind of helped the Jets beat the Bills last week. So got to take that away. Right.
Yeah.
And so if I'm the Bills, like I'm putting my best on Adams and bracketing him, and then saying, good luck, beating me elsewhere. And if you do, you do, but I'll take my chances.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day too, and one of the things that I want to see from the Bills defense this week, and I want to see if the transition from Sean McDermott to Leslie Frazier will change this a little bit. Jimmy Garoppolo attempted 3 passes over 20 yards against the Denver Broncos. 3. He was 0 for 1 to the right. He did not attempt a single pass over 20 yards over the middle of the football field, and he was 2 for 2 to the left for 41 yards. So he had a little bit of success going to the left on his deep balls. Do not give these receivers cushion. Jimmy G feeds off the easy stuff. So I want to see if Sean McDermott will be more aggressive, play up on these wide receivers, give them less cushion than they typically do. That was one of our biggest misgivings and one of our biggest, things that brought about rage within us when Leslie Frazier was a defensive coordinator. Does that change under Sean McDermott? Kyrie Elam is inactive, right? Like, that's the guy we brought in to do this and play physical with people, and he's inactive. So can Christian Benford do it? Can Trey White do it? Can Dane Jackson do it? If Dane Jackson makes his way onto the field, it'll be interesting to see. But if the Buffalo Bills are playing 10 yards off on these wide receivers and they are letting Jimmy G dink and dunk his way down the football field and trying to force them into field goals, I will lose my goddamn mind, because you don't have to do that. You don't have to. Like, I get that it's an effective strategy and it works, right? You limit the amount of points that they score, but it keeps your offense off the field. Don't let them dink and dunk their way down the field. I don't think they have I don't think they have the horses to make big plays down the field, especially if you can shut Davante Adams out. They don't have the auxiliary weapons to make plays down the field. Don't be afraid of the big play. Be aggressive. Play up on these dudes. Like, don't just let them dink and dunk and have their way down the field and then try to shut them down the red zone. I don't want to see that this week. I want to see a more aggressive Buffalo Bills defense. Charles G coming in with a comment. He says Adams can go 8 for 90 and the Bills can can blow them out. Stop Jacobs. I 100% agree with that statement. That's why our focus now is going to go to the Las Vegas Raiders running game. Josh Jacobs last week, 19 carries for only 48 yards, but honestly, he looked good. The blocking in front of him wasn't so great. There was a couple of times watching the game back where he broke 5 tackles and gained 1 yard. So that about shows you where the push is coming on that Raiders offensive line. But we know the kind of weapon that he is, and we know the issues the Buffalo Bills had. See last week and Breece Hall. The Raiders like to go heavy. 16 plays and 21 personnel, third most in the NFL last week. 5 plays and 22 personnel, third in the NFL last week. 4 plays and 23 personnel, second in the NFL last week. They had a 6 offensive lineman on the field in Thayer Munford, who was tackle eligible 14 times last week. Jakob Johnson, the big fullback, they like to get him involved. On top of all of that, they use pre-snap motion on 34 plays. 62% of their offensive plays involve pre-snap motion, 8th most in the NFL. So this is a team that's going to go heavy, and they're going to force you into conflict pre-snap. To me, Terrell Bernard, this is a big game. It's going to be a test for him. With that green dot, can he communicate properly? And then the next question becomes, how do the Buffalo Bills match this heavy personnel of the Las Vegas Raiders? Taylor Rapp, that was kind of a joke last week. He got burnt, right? You could bring in Dorian Williams or Tyrell Dotson, or you can keep Tyron Johnson on the field, and you can go nickel against some of these heavy personnel packages. How would you go about, or how do you want to see the Buffalo Bills go about attacking these heavy packages of the Las Vegas Raiders? Because if we lose this football game, we lose the football game for one of 2 reasons. Number 1, Josh learned no lessons and turns the ball over a ton. Or 2, the Las Vegas Raiders just have their way on the ground. Those are the 2 ways we lose this football game.
Well, I think Myers being out gives the Bills some more options, right? Jacoby Myers, that is. I think the Bills can maybe move out of the nickel base more than usual, potentially in this game. Go with some more traditional 3 linebacker, whether that's Dorian Williams, whether you bring Taylor Rapp in after, an average performance last week. I do think that getting, Rapp or Williams on the field with Milano, on the field with Bernard, that's something that I would consider as, Jessica says here, 4-3 with Williams. I'm not against that. I mean, obviously it's going to put some pressure on a guy like Dorian Williams as a rookie to come in and do that. But, he played pretty well in the preseason, and eventually this guy really needs to get some snaps. So this could be an opportunity, a game where that makes sense, right? And as Can't Get Right says here, they're going to try to run it down our throat. That's pretty much the only way of beating us. Buffalo has to expect that with Josh Jacobs. And as you mentioned, the 19 for 48 against the Broncos last week, they were only 2.1 yards per rush overall as a team last week. And if the Bills come anywhere close to that, you have to think they're going to be in a great position to win this game. Volume for Jacobs is really not going to be the question. It's going to be the efficiency. And again, first and second downs, are the Bills going to be giving up 3-4 yards a pop? Are the Raiders going to be in these short third down situations where they're going to convert and kind of keep moving the ball down the field? Or can the Bills hold up on early downs against these heavy formation, heavy packages from the Raiders? I think the key really here is the Bills need to shut Josh Jacobs down on early downs for them to be in a position to really like you said, get off the field. But if the Bills struggle on first and second downs against the run, this could be a long day. So
Mhm.
for me, really going to be looking at yards per play for the Raiders on first down, I think is going to be a big factor in this game.
Yeah, and then once you get them into those third and long situations, we gotta stop, get some
Yeah,
stops on
we
third and
do.
long. That's
We
another
do.
issue. The
It's been a
Buffalo
struggle.
Bills had the best.
It's been a struggle.
On to special teams real quick. Here are my notes for special teams. I think Bass and Carlson are equal kickers, two pretty good young kickers playing this football game. AJ Cole is better than Sam Martin. Sam Martin and that punting unit needs to clean things up this week because it was ugly in the preseason. And
I
it
think
was
they had tackling
against the
drills
Jets.
this week. The punting this week.
Yeah, they got to work on something. I mean, Sam Martin's been here for 2 years and he's punting the ball like he's been here for 2 weeks. Like there was miscommunication on where he should have punted that football. Like, come on, give me a break. DeAndre Carter, when healthy, he's the return guy. He's a very good return guy for the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly of the Washington Commanders and of the Los Angeles Chargers. However, he was dinged up all week on the injury report. They are without Jacoby Myers, so maybe they don't put DeAndre Carter out there to field kicks and punts. Maybe we see Amir Abdullah on kicks. Maybe we see Hunter Renfrow, who's a little bit more healthier on punts. But whoever it is, the Buffalo Bills have to deal with that, and DeAndre Carter is definitely the best of the bunch. And I'd like to see a little bit more wiggle out of Deontay Hardy. I'm not going to lie to you. Through the preseason, through 1 week, I'm a little underwhelmed. He doesn't look like the former All-Pro returner that he used to be.
Yeah, I think couple games in, he'll kind of get his footing. I'm not too overly concerned about the long term with Deontay Hardy, but I mean, just to me, looking at both of these units, like the Raiders have a fantastic special teams unit, right? I think it will be Renfrow on punt returns, just from a ball security standpoint. He has a little bit of wiggle on that first move as well. It seems logical for the Raiders to put him. Amir Abdullah has done kick returns his entire career, even back when he was with Minnesota, where he kind of earned his keep, I guess, doing that job. So both teams, really good special teams. Let's hope that this game doesn't come down to special teams. Because if it does, the Raiders are right there with the Bills, if not a little bit better.
One bad punt and from the Buffalo Bills this week, one big return allowed is something that could allow the Raiders to stay in this football game. So the Buffalo Bills need to cross their T's and dot their I's on special teams this week. All right, in a moment, we're going to get to our pre-game superlatives. We always like to have a little bit of fun at the end of the show, give some game predictions. But before we do that, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you could even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, Dave, time to have a little bit of fun here. And as always, we are going to get it started with our Take Me Higher player of the game, a star player on the Buffalo Bills that needs to have a big game outside of Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills to get that dub. Who is your Take Me Higher player of the game? And comment section, feel free to hit us up with your Take Me Higher player of the game this week.
Yeah, I mean, last week, I'm going to take Uber's guy from last week. I think for me, this week, it's going to be Matt Milano. Absolutely one of the best players on the field last week for the Bills, flying all over the field. I think blitzing this week could be huge for the Bills and kind of trying to slow down that efficiency of Jimmy G, getting in his face, really taking an advantage. And that plus advantage the Bills defensive line should already have on that Raiders offensive line, and adding sort of just on top of that with some Milano getting into the backfield and getting after Jimmy G. And I think Milano also just kind of being that guy who, we talked about Davante Adams kind of maybe being bracketed by White in a safety, but Milano being that kind of security blanket over the middle as well when it comes to things like slowing down guys like Austin Hooper, maybe even slowing down guys like Hunter Renfrow, being a sure tackler. He is going to have, I think, a really good game. And I think if Matt Milano puts together a really spectacular effort today, the Bills will come away with a convincing win. So give me Matt Milano.
Spin 0481 comes in and says Dalton Kincaid. Matt Riddell says James Cook. Charles G. No fun. Charles G says the only answer is Josh Allen. BFLO Mafia News comes in and says Gabe Davis. Astro says Jordan Poyer. Jessica Tennis says Cook with much bigger holes to run through. So a bunch of, and Kincaid can't get right, says Dalton as well. And I'll tell you what, I'm very unoriginal. I'm going with the same answer I had last week. I am manifesting this into reality, and I'm going to make this my take me higher player of the game until Ken Dorsey does what is right by this man, our first round draft pick, and feeds him the football. I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid.
Yep.
I expect a lot of two deep shell from the Raiders. Josh Allen has to get his slot weapon involved early and often. And then Dalton Kincaid, once he gets the ball in his hands, he needs to make some yards after the catch, make some plays to keep Josh Allen content, to keep him settled, to work that football down the field, to not tempt him to do anything stupid with the rock. Dalton Kincaid's got to be that security blanket, and the Buffalo Bills need to get him more involved this week. All right, on to our wild card player of the game. This is a non-star player. It can be a complimentary piece or a backup or a special teamer, somebody who's not one of our star players, who is going to step up this week and help the Buffalo Bills get that dub against the Las Vegas Raiders. Hit us up in the comments section with your wild card player, and Dave, let us know your wild card player of the game.
I mean, kind of in the same vein that you mentioned Kincaid, and we just got finished talking about special teams. A couple ways this player can affect the game. Give me Deontay Hardy as a wild card player this week. Maybe in special teams, getting a return or two, flipping the field, and maybe a reception or two where he's on the move, fielding the football. Even if it's at the line of scrimmage, maybe some screens to him, getting loose over the middle, running away from guys, running away from those linebackers who are really overall not great in coverage for the Raiders and Spillane and Diablo. Deontay Hardy on limited touches today could make his mark. So give me Deontay Hardy potentially as special teams wild card and receiving wild card.
Can't get right comes in with a good one. He says, I'm going defense, Leonard Floyd.
That was mine last week.
Shout out to Leonard Floyd. And how fun is it going to be when Von Miller gets back with those two, Gregory Rousseau, plus the interior pressure the Buffalo Bills can generate? Really looking forward to not just Leonard Floyd for the rest of the season, but Leonard Floyd once Von Miller returns as well. Brian G coming in saying Spencer Brown's a wild card. Yeah. Is it a good wild card or a bad wild card though? We're gonna find out. AJ Panessa is another wild card. He just blended in last week. Like he was a good rotational 4th, 5th defensive end, right? That's who he is at this point. It's a little disappointing that that's what you're getting from your second round draft pick, but hey, he comes in and he does his job as a rotational defensive end. Jason Hawkins says Christian Benford. McCoy comes in and says Rapp gets an interception this week. Astro thinks our entire D-line depth is going to step up with AJ Panessa and Shaq Lawson. And Jessica Tennis says Knox is going to have a great game chipping and going out into the passing game. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't prepare a second choice if you picked mine, and I picked Deontay Hardy as well. He got involved early last week. I want him to get involved early again this week and make it more consistent. Get him involved throughout the entirety of the football game. And I mentioned this at the top of the show. He's not Tyreek Hill, but Mike McDaniel is finding very creative ways to get pressure off of Tyreek Hill, get him free releases, and that is starting to be mimicked by other teams. Sean McVay did a really good job of getting Tutu Atwell free release off the line of scrimmage. Get the ball in the hands of your playmakers in space, and I think Deontay Hardy is the most explosive player on this offense. Get the ball in his hands, let him make plays. He doesn't need to touch the ball 15 times, but get him 4 to 5 good touches, good quality touches in this football game, and let him make plays. So I'm going to go Deontay Hardy as my wild card player of the game, and that brings us in our focus, in our attention to the Las Vegas Raiders and our Respect You player of the game. And really, Dave, to me, there are 3 choices here. Pick one of the 3.
Oh, man. You know what? For me, just seeing how last week went, seeing the turnovers from Josh Allen and seeing a couple bad reps from Spencer Brown, I'm going to have to go with Max Crosby here. To me, I think it's Crosby, Adams, and Jacobs, right? Those were the 3, but I'm going to go with Crosby. I think that's the single best matchup the Raiders have in this game, and it's a big one, right? It's a big one, depending on how the Bills can kind of help him out, whether it's Dawson Knox chipping or even staying in line. That's a huge ask for Spencer Brown, and it's a huge factor in how maybe Josh Allen plays as well, whether he's skittish to get out of the pocket, whether he turns the ball over or not. So for me, I'm going Max Crosby at the top of my list for this one.
Yeah, I had Max Crosby, Josh Jacobs, Davante Adams. I was prepared to say whichever one you didn't. Crosby can single-handedly wreck a game plan. I think of the three, Davante Adams is the smallest because even if he does have a big game, I think the Buffalo Bills can still be successful, as Charles G mentioned earlier. And
Yeah.
then Josh Jacobs. I mean, if he has a big day on the ground, that keeps our offense on the field and their offense on the field. Like that's the game right there. If they can run all over us, they can be really, really successful. We saw the Indianapolis Colts come in here a couple of years ago with Jonathan Taylor, and the Buffalo Bills offense just couldn't get on the field because Jonathan Taylor just went crazy. So that is the way for them to win this football game. Max Crosby forcing Josh Allen into mistakes, getting into his head, pressuring him, and Josh Jacobs running all over us. That is how the Las Vegas Raiders win this football game, and it's not unimaginable to think that either of those two things happen. All right, on to, ladies and gentlemen, our fire sale of the week, our hottest, spiciest takes. Hit us up. Oh, as my thing is freaking out here. Hit us up in the comment section with your spiciest takes of the week. And Dave, we'll start with you.
So my hot take for the week is that the Bills have two skill possession players go over 100 yards, whether it's receiving or rushing or combined. But they'll have two people on the offensive side of the ball combined, or each go for 100 scrimmage yards. So, betting man, probably that's going to be Stephon Diggs. Who knows? Gabe Davis on 2 or 3 targets could do it. James Cook between rushing and receiving could do it. And maybe, who knows? Maybe Dalton Kincaid blows the roof off and he goes for 100 receiving. But I do think the Bills will have two players in this game on the skill position side go for 100 yards from scrimmage.
Yeah, it has been a long time. Well, since Shady McCoy has left, we were the entire drought, whether it was Travis Henry or Willis McGahee or Fred Jackson or CJ Spiller or Shady McCoy. Buffalo Bills always had a really good running back who would run consistently for 100 yards. Since this new modern era of football has been brought to us, first by Brian Dable and now Ken Dorsey, really very rare do the Buffalo Bills have a 100-yard rusher, and if they do, it's usually Josh Allen. So if James Cook can get 100 yards on the ground this week, that would be fun. That'd be awesome.
Well,
right? Like that would be
100 scrimmage yards. I think he could get 100
yards. Yeah, but if he get 100 rushing yards, that's
even hotter. That's even hotter.
Let's do it. But that's not my hot take of the week. My hot take of the week, again, I'm all about manifesting things into reality. Von Miller has changed my life. I'm just all about manifesting now. Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox combined for 10 plus catches, 100 plus yards, and a touchdown. I think the Buffalo Bills get their two tight ends involved in this football game. I think they get involved in a big, big way. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time to get to our Back to the Future game predictions. Hit us up in the comment section with your game predictions. And Dave, start us off. Paint a picture for us. How's this game going to turn out?
Raiders win the toss. The Bills get the ball first and quickly go 3 and out. But then after that first 3 and out, the offense gets into a groove and really takes control of this game throughout the day. I think they will start out a little slow, but I think by the end of the first quarter, the offense will get in rhythm. I think the defense will be feeding off the home crowd. I think that the Bills are going to be more aggressive on defense today. I think they're going to force Jimmy G to make quick decisions, even quicker than he already does, because he does get rid of the ball quickly. And eventually the Bills do end up winning this one in the end by a couple scores. So I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be stressful. I think it's going to be high anxiety early on, but I do think eventually the Bills do pull away and end up winning by 2 scores. I'll go Bills 31, Raiders 17.
Nice. Spin 0481 comes in and says, why Judge bringing coolers to a hot take segment? Sophia G coming in saying totally weak hot take. And you're right. Like there were some spicier hot takes in there, which I didn't get a chance to get to. So I apologize. Spin came in and said Kincaid 2 touchdowns, 100 plus yards. Kincaid said Sophia 11 receptions, 100 plus yards. Charles G, this is the spiciest one, 0 Josh Allen turnovers. Astro came in and said that Ken Dorsey gets fired tomorrow if we lose this game, and Joe Brady becomes the offensive coordinator.
Some good hot takes.
There were some hotter takes in mine, so I apologize for not getting to those. I was having some graphics issues, so I wasn't paying attention to the comment section the way I should have been there. But my game prediction here is going to be Bills 30, Raiders 20. I think the Buffalo Bills control the game from start to finish, and it's never really close. I think Josh Allen shows poise and control. He blends working the ball, underneath with working the ball down the field. But I do think the Raiders get maybe like a late touchdown late to make it look a little bit closer than it is. So I'm going Bills 30, Raiders 20. That's a tight score. But I think that it's one of those deceiving tight scores. Brian G comes in and says 23-13 Bills. Renaissance Man says 34-17. Can't Get Right says that you stole his prediction there. And Jessica Tennis comes in with 38-17. So a lot of good predictions there. And most people in Bills Mafia confident the Buffalo Bills will get that dub this week. And they do really, really, really need to course correct this week. Dave, any final thoughts before we wrap this things up and let the people get to their pregame preparations?
Be interested to see around the NFL how much course correction there is. Week 1 is always such a weird week in the NFL. A lot of the games last week got off to really sluggish starts, especially offenses. And so, as you kind of got into the second halves of some of those games, some of the teams kind of got going, but like a lot of weird things last week across the NFL and a lot of unexpected things. So we'll see how much course correction there is in week 2, but the Bills, yes, absolutely need to get this win today.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, catch us tomorrow, 9 p.m. for our Bills Raiders reaction. Hopefully it's not a therapy session. We were saved. We were saved from having to do a therapy session this week. There just was no time for us to do a post-game show. I don't even know if I was in the right headspace to do a post-game show this week. Probably so I don't know how. I don't know how Greg and Aaron did it, but kudos to them and kudos to everyone at the Cover One team for putting together a show this week, reacting to whatever it was that happened last week. And I hope that today starts a journey where we can slowly forget that this game last week ever happened. Don't forget the Cover One post-game show is live tonight following the game. Greg, Aaron, Anth, they always do a great job breaking it down for you. David Fox will have his post-game report on cover1.football immediately following the game as well. And all right, Bills Mafia, get your beverages ready, your pizza heated up, your wings spicy hot and ready to go. Hit up that bathroom one last time before the game starts. Someone asked, what channel is the game on? It's a Fox game, correct? Fox game. I believe even though it's an AFC, I believe it's a Fox game. I have the YouTube TV because I'm out of market.
I'll be doing the
I'll be watching on YouTube TV. It's either a Fox game or a CBS game. That's something I usually look up before. It's a CBS game. Okay, it is a CBS game. So it'll be on your local CBS station if you're in Buffalo. It'll be on YouTube TV and Red Zone if you are out of market. All right, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. You are a big part of what makes this pregame what it is, what makes our postgame what it is, and really what makes this show and Cover One what it is. So thank you so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!